The sound of a woman's sobs echoed through the bustling main street of Redemption Creek. Yet no one stopped, not the shopkeepers arranging their storefronts, not the travelers dismounting from the afternoon stagecoach, not even the town's supposedly honorable sheriff who merely tipped his hat and continued on his way. Dahlia Whitman knelt in the dusty street, her trunk scattered around her, one broken open with her modest belongings spilled into the dirt. Her trembling hands tried in vain to gather the remnants of her life as tears streamed down her face, cutting clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. She had arrived on the stagecoach with nothing but these belongings and the promise of a teaching position that, as she just discovered, had already been filled. "Please," she called out to passing townspeople, her voice cracking. "I just need help getting my things to the boarding house." People averted their eyes. A group of men outside the saloon laughed, making crude comments about another Eastern girl come to tame the West. Dahlia's humiliation burned as hot as the Arizona sun beating down on her fair skin. Then a shadow fell across her, bringing momentary relief from the scorching heat. She looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the bright sky. The man knelt beside her, his face coming into view as he did, strong features weathered by sun and wind, kind eyes the color of a summer storm, and a quiet dignity in the way he held himself. "You're not alone," he said simply, his voice low and steady as he began gathering her scattered belongings. "Not anymore." Dahlia watched as his calloused hands gently folded a lace-trimmed blouse her mother had made for her. Something about the careful way his rough fingers handled the delicate fabric made her tears flow harder, though she couldn't have explained why. "I'm Dawson Everett," he introduced himself without looking up from his task. "Most folks around here just call me Everett." Dahlia wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. "Dahlia Whitman. I was promised a teaching position, but..." "Ah," he nodded, understanding immediately. "You must be the teacher Mayor Reynolds wrote to. There's been some trouble." He closed the repaired latch on her trunk. "Let's get you sorted first, Miss Whitman, then we can talk about what comes next." Within minutes, Dawson had loaded her trunks onto his wagon. He offered his hand to help her up to the seat, and Dahlia hesitated only briefly before accepting. His hand was warm and strong around hers, and for the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, she felt something other than despair. As the wagon rolled down the main street, Dahlia became acutely aware of the stares from the townspeople. Some looked curious, others disapproving. Dawson seemed not to notice, or perhaps he simply didn't care. "The boarding house is full up," he explained, guiding the horses away from the main street. "Mrs. Holloway takes in most newcomers, but she's got relatives visiting from back east." Dahlia's heart sank. "Where will I stay? I have very little money left after the journey." "My sister runs a small ranch just outside of town. She's got a spare room she rents out occasionally. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe." He glanced at her, gauging her reaction. "Unless you'd prefer I take you back to the stagecoach office. Next coach east leaves tomorrow morning." "No," Dahlia said quickly, surprising herself with her conviction. "I came west for a reason, Mr. Everett. I won't turn back at the first sign of trouble." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Most folks don't last a day in Redemption Creek with that attitude. Those that do tend to make something of themselves." They traveled the rest of the way in comfortable silence. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up before them, endless sky stretching over red-gold earth, distant mountains sharp against the horizon. Despite her circumstances, Dahlia felt a stirring of wonder at the wild beauty of it all. Dawson's sister's ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a modest house with a barn and corral, nestled against a backdrop of saguaro cacti and mesquite trees. A woman stood on the porch, shading her eyes against the sun as she watched their approach. "Deanna," Dawson called as they pulled up to the hitching post. "Got someone here needs a place to stay." Deanna Everett was tall like her brother, with the same storm-colored eyes, though her face was softer, framed by auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore men's trousers and a loose shirt with a gun belt strapped to her hip. Another stray Dawson. She called back, but there was affection rather than reproach in her tone. "Miss Whitman was supposed to be our new schoolteacher," he explained as he helped Dahlia down from the wagon. Seems the mayor forgot to mention they hired someone else last month. Deanna's expression softened. That's Reynolds for you, always making promises he can't keep. She extended her hand to Dahlia. Dahlia Everett, welcome to Whispering Pine Ranch. Dahlia took her hand, surprised by the firm grip. Dahlia Whitman, I appreciate your hospitality, especially on such short notice. Any friend of my brother's is welcome here, Deanna said, though she gave Dawson a look that suggested they would be discussing this further in private. Let's get you settled. You look like you could use a wash and a hot meal. As Dawson carried her trunks inside, Dahlia followed Deanna into a simple but welcoming home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and a few comfortable-looking pieces of furniture. Shelves lined one wall, filled with more books than Dahlia had expected to find in a frontier home. You read, she observed, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Deanna smiled. Pa was big on education, made sure we both knew our letters and numbers and then some. Those books were his pride and joy. Dawson's added quite a few over the years. Dahlia glanced at Dawson, seeing him in a new light. He was carrying her largest trunk with ease, but there was nothing brutish about him. His movements were deliberate, his manner thoughtful. Your room's through here. Deanna led her to a small but clean room off the main living area. It contained a narrow bed, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a small wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the desert landscape. It's not much, it's perfect, Dahlia said sincerely. After weeks of travel, sleeping in stagecoaches and crowded way stations, the simple room looked like paradise. Dawson set down her trunk. I'll bring in the rest of your things, then see to the horses. Thank you, Mr. Everett, Dahlia said, for everything. He nodded once, his expression unreadable, and left the room. Deanna watched him go, then turned to Dahlia. My brother doesn't say much, but when he does, it's worth listening to. If he brought you here, he saw something in you worth helping. I don't know why, Dahlia admitted. I was just crying in the street. Everyone else walked by. That's Redemption Creek for you. Town's got a good heart under all the dust and whiskey, but it takes time to show itself. Deanna moved toward the door. Get settled. There's water in the pitcher for washing up. Supper's in an hour. Left alone, Dahlia sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up with her. She'd come west full of hope, seeking independence and purpose after her father's death had left her with few options in Philadelphia. Her teaching credentials and experience were supposed to be her ticket to a new life. Now, she found herself dependent on the kindness of strangers, with no clear path forward. She allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of doubt and self-pity before rising to wash her face and change her travel-stained dress. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she would face it with as much dignity as she could muster. By the time she emerged for supper, Dahlia had regained her composure. The simple meal of beef stew, cornbread, and coffee was the best food she'd tasted in weeks. Deanna kept the conversation flowing, asking about Dahlia's journey west and sharing stories about the ranch and the town. Dawson spoke little, but Dahlia noticed how attentively he listened, his gaze occasionally meeting hers across the table. There was something reassuring about his presence, solid and steadfast, like the mountains on the horizon. After the meal, as they sat with coffee, Deanna addressed the situation directly. So, what do you plan to do now, Miss Whitman? Dahlia set down her cup. I'm not entirely sure. I have enough money for perhaps 2 weeks of boarding, but after that. She straightened her shoulders. I need to find work. I'm a qualified teacher, but I'm willing to do whatever is necessary. Teaching jobs are scarce around here, Deanna said, but there might be other opportunities. The general store could use help, and there's always work for those willing to do it. I could speak to Tom Wilson at the Mercantile, Dawson offered, breaking his silence. He mentioned needing someone who can keep proper accounts. I'm quite good with figures, Dahlia said, grateful for the suggestion. My father was an accountant. He taught me his methods. Then that's a start, Deanna said with approval. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here. The usual rate is $2 a week, including meals, but we can make arrangements if needed. That's more than fair, Dahlia said, relieved, and I'd be happy to help around the ranch to earn my keep. Deanna laughed. Be careful what you offer, Miss Whitman. I might just take you up on it. Later, as Dahlia prepared for bed in her small room, she heard the low murmur of the siblings' voices from the main room. Though she couldn't make out the words, the tone suggested a disagreement. She hoped she wasn't causing problems between them. Sleep came surprisingly easily that night, despite the unfamiliar surroundings and uncertain future. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of travel, or perhaps it was the sense that, for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she had found people she could trust. Morning dawned clear and bright, the desert light filtering through the simple curtains. Dahlia dressed quickly in one of her plainer dresses, determined to be useful. She found Deanna in the kitchen, already busy with breakfast preparations. "Good morning," Dahlia greeted her. "May I help?" Deanna looked up from the stove. "You're up early, thought you might sleep in after your journey." "I'm used to early hours," Dahlia replied, rolling up her sleeves. "What needs doing?" Deanna assigned her to setting the table and mixing biscuit dough, tasks Dahlia completed with practiced efficiency. By the time Dawson came in from the barn, breakfast was nearly ready. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene of the two women working together in the kitchen. Something in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or approval, made Dahlia's cheeks warm. "Morning," he said, removing his hat. "Smells good in here." "Miss Whitman's a fair hand in the kitchen," Deanna commented, giving Dahlia an appreciative nod. "Please call me Dahlia," she said. "And I'm happy to help. It's the least I can do." Over breakfast, Dawson outlined the day's plan. "I'll take you into town after we eat. Wilson opens the mercantile at 8. After that, I need to see the blacksmith about some new shoes for Blaze." "I appreciate your taking the time," Dahlia said. "It's on my way," he replied, though Dahlia suspected he was rearranging his day to accommodate her needs. The ride into town was different from the previous day's journey. In the clear morning light, Redemption Creek looked less intimidating, a rough-hewn settlement carved out of the wilderness, yes, but also a place where people were building lives and communities. Dawson pointed out landmarks as they rode the church that doubled as a school during the week, the small doctor's office run by an army surgeon who'd settled there after the war, the newspaper office that printed a weekly edition distributed throughout the territory. "It's grown some since I first came," he told her. "Used to be just the trading post and a few tents. Now we've got almost 500 souls, counting the outlying ranches." "How long have you been here?" Dahlia asked, genuinely curious about this quiet man who had come to her aid. "Going on 15 years now. Came west after the war with not much more than the clothes on my back and the horse under me." His eyes scanned the horizon as he spoke. "Deanna followed a year later. Our parents were gone, and there wasn't much left for us back in Missouri." "I'm sorry about your parents," Dahlia said softly. He nodded acknowledgement but didn't elaborate. "What about you? What brings a Philadelphia teacher all the way to Arizona territory?" Dahlia hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "My father died last year. Left enough to cover his debts, but not much else. I was teaching at a girls' academy, but the headmistress's nephew needed the position." She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. "When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Redemption Creek, it seemed like Providence." "Reynolds shouldn't have hired someone else without notifying you," Dawson said, frowning. "It's not right." "These things happen," Dahlia said, though she appreciated his indignation on her behalf. "At least I've found a temporary place to stay, thanks to you and your sister." They reached the town just as businesses were opening for the day. The Mercantile was a large building on the main street, with a covered porch and large windows displaying goods ranging from tools and fabric to canned foods and medicines. Thomas Wilson, the proprietor, was a balding man in his 50s with spectacles and an air of perpetual distraction. He greeted Dawson warmly and listened attentively as the cowboy explained Dahlia's situation. "An accountant's daughter, you say?" Wilson's eyes brightened. "And you can read and write. Well now, that might be just the thing. My eyesight's not what it was, and these ledgers are getting to be more than I can manage." He led Dahlia to a small desk in the corner of the store, where several leather-bound ledgers lay open amid piles of receipts and invoices. "It's a bit of a mess, I'm afraid. Been meaning to get it sorted for months." Dahlia surveyed the chaos with a professional eye. "I can put this in order for you, Mr. Wilson. It will take some time to reconcile everything, but once a system is in place, maintaining it should be straightforward. Wilson beamed. That's exactly what I need to hear, Miss Whitman. I can offer $3 a week to start with a review after a month. Hours would be 8 to 5, Monday through Saturday, with Wednesday afternoon and Sunday off. Would that suit? It was less than she'd earned as a teacher, but more than enough to cover her board at the Everett Ranch and begin rebuilding her savings. That would suit very well, Mr. Wilson. When would you like me to start? How about right now? He suggested eagerly. No time like the present, eh? Dahlia glanced at Dawson, who nodded. I'll be around town for a couple of hours. Meet you at the cafe for lunch at noon. That would be fine, she agreed, already rolling up her sleeves to tackle the accounting mess before her. The morning passed quickly as Dahlia sorted through months of neglected bookkeeping. Wilson's system, such as it was, had been abandoned entirely in some places, requiring her to reconstruct transactions from scattered receipts and memory. Despite the challenge, she found the work satisfying. There was something calming about bringing order to chaos, finding patterns in the numbers that told the story of the business. By noon, she had made significant progress on the most recent month's accounts and had outlined a plan for tackling the backlog. Wilson was delighted. You're a godsend, Miss Whitman, he declared. I haven't seen these books look so tidy since my late wife kept them. Dahlia was washing the ink from her fingers when Dawson appeared at the store's entrance. He'd acquired a few packages during his morning errands, which he stowed in his saddlebags before escorting her to the cafe across the street. The establishment was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and curtains that looked freshly laundered. Several tables were occupied by townspeople who eyed Dahlia with undisguised curiosity. News travels fast in a small town, Dawson explained as they took seats by the window. By now, everyone knows you're staying at Whispering Pine and working for Wilson. I suppose that saves me the trouble of introductions, Dahlia said with a small smile. Some of them might come around to welcome you properly, others will wait to see if you stay. There was something in his tone that made her look up sharply. You don't think I will? He considered her for a moment. Most don't, especially women from back east. The territory's hard on everyone, but it's hardest on those used to city comforts. I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Everett, she assured him, and I have nowhere else to go. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. Then you'll do fine. The waitress, a girl of about 16 with freckles and a ready smile, arrived to take their order. Hey there, Everett, this must be the new lady staying out at your place. I'm Molly Jenkins. Dahlia Whitman, Dahlia introduced herself. It's nice to meet you, you too. We don't get many new faces that stay more than a night or two. Molly's frank assessment reminded Dahlia of what Dawson had just said. Today we've got beef stew or ham sandwiches. They both ordered the stew, which arrived promptly with thick slices of bread. As they ate, Dawson pointed out various townspeople, giving Dahlia a brief overview of the community she had joined. The man by the door is Judge Parker. He rides circuit through the territory, but his home base is here. Fair man, even with the worst offenders. Next to him is Doc Matthews, who I mentioned earlier. The woman in the blue dress is Mrs. Reynolds, the mayor's wife. She runs the lending library out of their home on Thursdays. Dahlia absorbed the information, grateful for the orientation. What about you, Mr. Everett? What do you do besides rescuing stranded teachers? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I raise horses, mainly, do some cattle ranching with Deanna, but horses are my specialty. Army contracts keep us going in lean times. He's being modest, Molly interjected as she refilled their coffee cups. Everett's horses are the finest in 3 territories. Even the Apache come to trade for them, and they know horseflesh better than anyone. Dawson looked uncomfortable with the praise. The land's good for raising horses, that's all. Is that what brought you to this particular part of the territory? Dahlia asked. He nodded. The valley has year-round water and good grazing. I staked my claim before most folks knew the area existed. Deanna joined me after our parents passed, brought some capital from selling the family farm. We built the ranch together. There was pride in his voice when he spoke of the ranch, a quiet confidence that Dahlia found appealing. Unlike the boastful men she'd known back east, Dawson Everett let his accomplishments speak for themselves. After lunch, they parted ways, Dahlia returning to the mercantile to continue her work, Dawson to complete his errands before heading back to the ranch. They agreed he would return at 5 to take her home. The afternoon passed in a blur of numbers and inventory lists. By closing time, Dahlia had made remarkable progress, earning Wilson's effusive thanks and the promise of a small bonus if she could get the accounts fully reconciled by the end of the month. True to his word, Dawson was waiting outside when she emerged from the store. The ride back to the ranch was companionable, with Dahlia sharing her progress and Dawson offering occasional comments about the landscape they passed. As they approached Whispering Pine, Dahlia saw it with new eyes, not just as a temporary refuge, but as a home built through years of hard work and determination. The fences were straight and well-maintained, the buildings solid, the grounds neat. It spoke of careful stewardship and attention to detail. Deanna was in the corral, working with a young horse on a lead rope. She waved as they approached but continued her training session. Dawson helped Dahlia down from the wagon, his hands strong at her waist. For a brief moment, they stood close enough that she could smell the leather and sage scent of him, could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "Thank you for your help today," she said, stepping back, suddenly aware of how improper it might appear for her to be living under the same roof as this unmarried man, despite his sister's presence. "Just being neighborly," he replied, but there was something in his gaze that suggested it might be more than that. Over the next few weeks, Dahlia settled into a routine that became increasingly comfortable. Weekdays were spent at the mercantile, bringing order to Wilson's business affairs and gradually taking on more responsibilities in the store itself. Evenings and Sundays were passed at the ranch, where she helped Deanna with household tasks and gradually learned about ranch life. To her surprise, Dahlia found herself enjoying the physical work of the ranch, feeding chickens, tending the kitchen garden, even learning to milk the cow under Deanna's patient instruction. There was a satisfaction in these practical tasks that she hadn't expected, a connection to the rhythms of the natural world that had been absent in her city life. Dawson was often busy with the horses or away on business, but when their paths crossed, Dahlia found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet cowboy. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he did speak, his observations were thoughtful and often laced with dry humor. He treated her with respect but not distance, including her in conversations about the ranch's operations and listening to her opinions with genuine interest. One Sunday afternoon, about a month after her arrival, Dahlia was sitting on the porch with a book when Dawson approached, leading a gentle-looking mare. "Thought you might like to learn to ride," he said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "If you're going to stay in the territory, it's a skill worth having." Dahlia marked her place in the book and stood. "I'd like that. Though I should warn you, my experience is limited to a few led pony rides in Philadelphia parks." "Buttercup here is patient with beginners," he assured her, patting the mare's neck. "Deanna learned on her. She's steady as they come." For the next hour, Dawson taught Dahlia the basics of horsemanship, how to mount and dismount properly, how to hold the reins, how to signal the horse with subtle shifts in weight and pressure. He was a patient teacher, explaining each step clearly and demonstrating when needed. By the end of the lesson, Dahlia was able to walk the mare in a large circle around the corral, feeling more confident with each circuit. The sensation of moving in partnership with such a powerful animal was exhilarating. "You're a natural," Dawson commented as he helped her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary, and Dahlia felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the riding lesson. "Hardly," she laughed, smoothing her skirts, "but I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for teaching me." "We'll continue next Sunday if you'd like," he offered, leading Buttercup to the water trough. "Eventually, you could ride to town instead of taking the wagon." The idea of such independence appealed to Dahlia. "I'd like that very much." As they walked back to the house, Dawson seemed to be considering something. Finally, he said, "There's a social at the church next Saturday evening, dancing, food, that sort of thing. The whole town turns out for it." He cleared his throat. I thought you might like to go, meet more people. Dahlia glanced at him, trying to determine if this was merely neighborly concern for her integration into the community or something more personal. His expression gave little away, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there during the riding lesson. That sounds lovely, she said carefully. Would you and Deanna be attending as well? Deanna usually goes. She's on the organizing committee. He looked straight ahead as they walked. I thought I might escort you if that would be acceptable. A warm pleasure spread through Dahlia at his words. Yes, that would be very acceptable, Mr. Everett. Dawson, he corrected, finally looking at her directly. If we're going to be social, you might as well use my given name. Dawson, she repeated, smiling, and you must call me Dahlia. The week leading up to the social passed slowly for Dahlia, who found herself anticipating Saturday evening with increasing excitement. She spent her Wednesday afternoon off examining her limited wardrobe, trying to determine which dress would be most appropriate for the occasion. Deanna found her deliberating between two options: a blue cotton with white trim that was practical but plain, and a rose-colored silk that was her best dress but perhaps too formal for a frontier gathering. The rose won, Deanna said decisively from the doorway. It brings out the color in your cheeks. Dahlia turned, surprised. You don't think it's too much? I don't want to appear frivolous, Deanna laughed. It's a social, Dahlia, the one time everyone gets dressed up and pretends we're not all covered in dust and calluses the rest of the time. She entered the room and examined the dress. It's lovely. Dawson won't be able to take his eyes off you. Dahlia felt herself blush. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Deanna's knowing look made it clear she wasn't fooled. My brother's been finding all sorts of excuses to be around the house since you arrived. I haven't seen him this interested in anything besides horses in years. We're friends, Dahlia said, uncertain how to define their relationship. He's been very kind to me. Dawson's a good man, Deanna said, her tone softening. The best I know, but he's been alone a long time after the war. She hesitated. Well, some wounds don't show on the outside. Dahlia thought of the distant look that sometimes came over Dawson's face, the way he occasionally seemed to withdraw into himself. He doesn't speak of it. No, he wouldn't. Deanna smoothed a wrinkle from the rose dress. Just be patient with him. He moves at his own pace. I'm not going anywhere, Dahlia assured her, realizing as she said it how true it had become. In just a month, Redemption Creek had begun to feel like home in a way Philadelphia never had. Saturday evening arrived clear and mild, perfect weather for the social. Dahlia took extra care with her appearance, arranging her dark hair in a style that was neat but softer than her usual practical bun. The rose dress fit well, its modest neckline and long sleeves appropriate for the occasion while still being feminine and flattering. When she emerged from her room, Deanna gave an approving nod. Beautiful. Now I'd better hurry and change or we'll be late. Dawson was waiting in the main room, dressed in what was clearly his best outfit: clean dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black vest. His usually unruly hair was neatly combed and he'd trimmed his beard. He looked up as Dahlia entered, and the admiration in his eyes made her heart skip. You look very nice, he said, the understatement somehow more meaningful than effusive compliments would have been. Thank you, so do you. She smoothed her skirts, suddenly feeling shy. Deanna joined them, resplendent in a green dress that complemented her auburn hair. Well, don't we clean up nicely? Let's go show these townspeople that the Whispering Pine folk know how to make an entrance. The church had been transformed for the evening's festivities. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the cleared space where pews had been moved aside to create a dance floor. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small group of musicians, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica were setting up in the corner. As they entered, Dahlia was surprised by the number of people who approached to greet her. In the past month, she had met many of the townspeople through her work at the Mercantile, but she hadn't realized how many had taken note of her presence. Mrs. Reynolds, the mayor's wife, was particularly welcoming. Miss Whitman, I'm so pleased you could join us. I've been meaning to call on you, but one thing and another. You must think us terribly rude after that mix-up with the teaching position. Not at all, Dahlia assured her. Everything has worked out for the best. Mr. Wilson has been very generous, and the Everetts have made me feel quite at home. Yes, I can see that, Mrs. Reynolds said with a meaningful glance at Dawson, who stood protectively close to Dahlia's side. Well, I hope you'll consider joining Our Ladies' Aid Society. We meet on Tuesday afternoons to sew for the poor and discuss community improvements. I'd be honored, Dahlia said sincerely, touched by the invitation. As the evening progressed, Dahlia found herself genuinely enjoying the company of her new neighbors. The food was plentiful and delicious, the conversation lively, and the atmosphere warm with camaraderie. She noticed that Dawson stayed close, introducing her to people she hadn't yet met and ensuring her plate and cup were always full. When the musicians began to play in earnest, couples moved onto the makeshift dance floor. Dahlia watched, enjoying the sight of the townspeople relaxed and joyful, a side of Redemption Creek she hadn't fully appreciated before. Would you care to dance? Dawson's voice was low in her ear, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. She turned to him, surprised. I didn't take you for a dancing man. A hint of a smile touched his lips. There's a lot you don't know about me yet, Dahlia Whitman. The yet hung between them, full of promise. She placed her hand in his outstretched one. I look forward to finding out. Dawson led her onto the floor just as the musicians struck up a waltz. His hand at her waist was firm but gentle, his lead confident as they joined the other couples circling the floor. Dahlia had learned the waltz at school in Philadelphia, but dancing with Dawson was different from the stilted practice sessions with other girls or the few formal dances she'd attended back east. There was a naturalness to their movement together, as if they had been dancing for years rather than minutes. Dawson guided her with subtle pressure, anticipating her steps, creating a harmony that made the simple church hall feel like a grand ballroom. You dance beautifully, she said, looking up at him with genuine admiration. My mother insisted we learn, he replied, said even cowboys ought to know how to behave in polite society. She was a wise woman, she was, his expression softened at the memory. You'd have liked her. She had a fondness for books, like you. The idea that he had thought about what his mother would have made of her touched Dahlia deeply. It suggested he'd been considering her place in his life in ways that went beyond their current arrangement. They danced 3 more dances before taking a break for refreshments. As they stood by the punch bowl, Dahlia became aware of the speculative glances being cast their way by the townspeople. Their attention made her self-conscious, but Dawson seemed untroubled. People are watching us, she murmured. Let them, he replied simply. They've been waiting years to see me take an interest in something besides horses and cattle. His frank acknowledgement of his interest sent a rush of warmth through her. Before she could respond, however, they were interrupted by the arrival of a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit. Everett, the man greeted, his tone cordial but his eyes sharp. Didn't expect to see you at a social gathering. Hollister, Dawson nodded, his posture subtly shifting to place himself between the newcomer and Dahlia. Thought you were in Tucson on business, just returned yesterday. Hollister's gaze moved to Dahlia, appraising her in a way that made her uncomfortable. And who might this lovely lady be? Dawson's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. Miss Dahlia Whitman, recently of Philadelphia. She's working for Wilson at the Mercantile. Dahlia, this is Edward Hollister. He owns the Silver Dollar Saloon and several other businesses in town. Dahlia offered a polite nod. Mr. Hollister. Miss Whitman. Hollister's smile didn't reach his eyes. A pleasure to meet you. Philadelphia, you say. You're a long way from home. Redemption Creek is my home now, she replied, sensing undercurrents in the conversation that she didn't fully understand. Is that so? Hollister's gaze flicked between her and Dawson. Well, welcome to our little community. If you ever find yourself in need of employment beyond Wilson's dusty ledgers, the Silver Dollar is always looking for refined ladies to serve drinks and provide conversation to our patrons. The pay is considerably better. Dahlia felt Dawson tense beside her. Before he could speak, she responded firmly. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Hollister, but I'm quite satisfied with my current position. Hollister laughed, a sound without humor. Of course you are. Well, the offer stands. Good evening to you both. He turned and walked away, stopping to speak with the mayor across the room. "I apologize for him," Dawson said, his voice tight. "Hollister enjoys making people uncomfortable. It's how he measures his own importance." "You don't like him," Dahlia observed. "Few do, but his money speaks louder than his character in some circles." Dawson's expression was grim. "He's been trying to buy my land for years. Seems to think everything has a price." "Does it?" Dahlia asked quietly. Dawson looked down at her, his gaze intense. "Not everything, no." The moment stretched between them, charged with meaning. Then the musicians began another tune, a lively reel that broke the tension. "Would you like to dance again?" he asked, offering his hand. Dahlia placed her fingers in his. "I would." The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with more dancing and conversation. By the time they departed, with Deanna riding alongside in the wagon, Dahlia felt more connected to the community than she had since her arrival. More importantly, she felt connected to Dawson in a way that both thrilled and frightened her with its intensity. As the weeks passed, Dahlia's place in Redemption Creek became more established. Her work at the mercantile expanded beyond bookkeeping to include ordering inventory and assisting customers. Wilson, delighted with her efficiency, raised her salary to $4 a week and began to rely on her judgment in many aspects of the business. Her Sunday riding lessons with Dawson continued, and she progressed from walking in circles to confident trots, and eventually, to short trail rides around the ranch property. These excursions became the highlight of her week, not just for the growing skill and independence they represented, but for the time spent alone with Dawson. During these rides, he would point out features of the landscape, teaching her to read the natural world as easily as she read books. He showed her how to identify medicinal plants, how to find water in seemingly dry terrain, how to navigate by landmarks rather than roads. Sometimes they would stop at a scenic overlook, dismount, and simply enjoy the vastness of the desert landscape together. It was during one such moment, about 3 months after her arrival in Redemption Creek, that their relationship shifted. They had ridden to a high ridge overlooking the valley, where wildflowers painted the desert floor in patches of yellow and purple following recent rains. The sight was breathtaking, and Dahlia found herself speechless with wonder. "It's like something from a painting," she finally said, standing beside Dawson as they gazed out over the vista. "Better," he replied. "Paintings can't capture the scent of sage after rain, or the way the light changes the colors minute by minute." She glanced at him, struck by the poetry in his observation. "You truly love this land. It's part of me now." His eyes remained on the horizon. "When I first came here after the war, I was lost, couldn't sleep without nightmares, couldn't find purpose in anything." He rarely spoke of that time, and Dahlia held her breath, afraid to interrupt the flow of his words. "This place healed something in me. The openness of it, the honesty. Land doesn't lie to you or make promises it can't keep. It just is." "I think I understand," Dahlia said softly. "Since coming here, I've felt more myself somehow, as if I've shed layers I didn't know I was wearing." He turned to her then, his gaze intense. "You fit here, Dahlia. Some people never do, no matter how long they stay. But you, it's like you've always belonged." The words touched something deep inside her. "I feel that way too. When I first arrived, I was devastated about the teaching position. Now I can't imagine what my life would be if things had gone according to plan." "If they had, we might never have met," Dawson said, taking a step closer to her. "You wouldn't have been crying in the street that day. And you wouldn't have been the only one to stop," she finished, looking up at him. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Then, with deliberate slowness, Dawson reached out to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Dahlia leaned into the contact, her heart pounding. "I've wanted to do this for weeks," he murmured, bending his head toward hers. "What took you so long?" she whispered just before his lips met hers. The kiss was tender, a question rather than a demand. Dahlia answered by moving closer, her hands coming to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own, could taste the coffee he'd had at breakfast, and something essentially him that made her dizzy with desire. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Dawson kept his arms around her. I'm not a man of many words, Dahlia, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are substantial. She couldn't help but smile at his careful phrasing. Substantial. A flicker of answering humor lit his eyes. Significant, considerable, extensive. Are there any other synonyms you'd like to employ? Profound, he added, his expression growing serious again. Lasting. The declaration, for that's what it was, sent a rush of joy through her. My feelings for you are equally substantial, Dawson Everett, in all the synonyms you've listed and more besides. His smile then was like the sun breaking through clouds rare and all the more precious for its scarcity. He bent to kiss her again, more confidently this time, and Dahlia lost herself in the sensation of being held by this man who had come to mean so much to her in such a relatively short time. Their return to the ranch was marked by a new awareness between them, a sense of possibilities opening up before them. Deanna, observant as always, took one look at their faces as they rode into the yard and broke into a knowing grin. About time, was all she said, but her approval was evident in her tone. In the days that followed, Dahlia and Dawson's courtship progressed with the same steady deliberation that characterized everything he did. He began escorting her to and from town each day, adjusting his schedule to accommodate hers. They took their midday meals together at the cafe, where the townspeople observed their growing closeness with approving nods and knowing smiles. Even Mr. Wilson commented on the change. Never seen Everett look so content, he remarked one afternoon as they watched Dawson loading supplies onto his wagon across the street. Man's carried shadows since the war. You've brought light back to him, Miss Whitman. The observation touched Dahlia deeply. She had come to understand that Dawson's quiet nature masked depths of feeling that few were privileged to witness. That he had opened himself to her was a gift she treasured. One evening in late summer, about 6 months after Dahlia's arrival in Redemption Creek, Dawson suggested a ride after supper. The days were still long, with twilight lingering well into the evening, and the desert heat had begun to soften with the approach of autumn. They rode to a small mesa not far from the ranch, where a natural spring created an oasis of greenery amid the arid landscape. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and wildflowers bloomed along the water's edge. It was a peaceful spot, one that Dawson had shown her on previous rides. They dismounted and secured the horses, then spread a blanket beneath the largest cottonwood. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the light filtering through the leaves to create dappled patterns on the ground. "This is lovely," Dahlia said, settling beside him on the blanket. "Thank you for bringing me here." Dawson seemed unusually tense, his usual calm demeanor disturbed by some inner turmoil. "There's something I need to ask you," he said finally, turning to face her directly. Dahlia's heart quickened. "Yes," he took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I never expected to find someone who would understand me, who would choose this life, this place." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I'm not a wealthy man, Dahlia. What I have is the ranch, the horses, and whatever future we might build together, if that's enough for you." "It's more than enough," she assured him, her voice thick with emotion. Dawson reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that glinted in the fading light, a ring, simple but beautiful, with a small diamond set in silver. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Deanna kept it safe all these years, waiting for the right time." He held it between them, an offering and a question. "Dahlia Whitman, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Dawson Everett, I will marry you." His smile was luminous as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Dahlia looked at it in wonder, then up at the man who had just pledged his life to hers. "I love you," she said, the words simple but profound. "And I love you," he replied, gathering her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. They returned to the ranch after dark, riding side by side under a canopy of stars. Deanna was waiting on the porch, a lamp burning beside her. One look at their faces told her everything she needed to know. "Well," she demanded, rising to meet them as they dismounted. Dahlia held out her hand, the ring catching the lamplight. He asked. I said yes. Deanna's whoop of joy echoed across the yard. She embraced Dahlia fiercely, then turned to hug her brother with equal enthusiasm. Took you long enough. I was beginning to think I'd have to propose for you. Dawson's expression was one of pure contentment. Some things are worth taking time to do right. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Redemption Creek. Wilson insisted on hosting a small celebration at the Mercantile, and the Ladies' Aid Society immediately began planning for the wedding. Mrs. Reynolds appointed herself unofficial coordinator, discussing potential dates and arrangements with enthusiasm that both touched and overwhelmed Dahlia. October would be lovely, she declared over tea in her parlor. The weather will be perfect, not too hot, not too cold. And it will give us just enough time to prepare properly. Dahlia, who had envisioned a simple ceremony, found herself swept along by the community's excitement. It seemed that everyone in town had a suggestion or an offer of help, from the dressmaker who volunteered to create her wedding gown at cost, to the baker who promised a wedding cake, the likes of which Redemption Creek has never seen. I had no idea our wedding would become such a town affair, she confessed to Dawson one evening as they sat on the porch, reviewing the growing list of tasks and arrangements. He chuckled, his arm around her shoulders. Small towns take any excuse for a celebration. And they've taken to you, Dahlia. You've become one of them. The realization warmed her. She had come to Redemption Creek as a stranger, desperate and alone. Now she was embraced as a member of the community with a future brighter than she could have imagined. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparations. Deanna insisted that Dahlia move into the main bedroom of the ranch house, while she and Dawson would stay in the barn loft until after the ceremony for propriety's sake, she declared with a wink. It's ridiculous, Dawson grumbled, sleeping in my own barn when I have a perfectly good house. It's traditional, Deanna countered, and it will make the wedding night all the more special. Dahlia blushed at the implication, but couldn't deny the wisdom of the arrangement. Though their courtship had included many passionate moments, they had maintained certain boundaries, both out of respect for conventions and from a mutual desire to save some aspects of their relationship for marriage. As October approached, the ranch transformed. Deanna and a team of women from town cleaned and decorated the house and grounds, preparing for the reception that would follow the church ceremony. The barn was swept and hung with lanterns for dancing, and tables were set up under the cottonwood trees for the feast. The day before the wedding, Dahlia received an unexpected visitor. She was in the kitchen, helping Deanna prepare food for the next day's celebration, when a knock came at the door. Deanna wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer it. Dahlia heard murmured conversation, then Deanna returned with a look of surprise. It's Edward Hollister, she said quietly. He's asking to speak with you, says it's important. Dahlia frowned, puzzled. She had seen Hollister occasionally around town since their first meeting at the social, but they had exchanged nothing more than polite nods. Did he say what it's about? Deanna shook her head. Just that it concerns you and Dawson. Concerned but curious, Dahlia removed her apron and went to the door. Hollister stood on the porch, looking uncomfortable but determined. Miss Whitman, he greeted her, hat in hand. I apologize for the intrusion, especially on the eve of your wedding. Mr. Hollister, she acknowledged. How can I help you? He glanced over his shoulder as if checking that they were alone. May we speak privately? What I have to say concerns your future husband, and I believe you should hear it before you take your vows. Alarm bells rang in Dahlia's mind, but she maintained her composure. Whatever you have to say about Dawson can be said in front of me and his sister. We have no secrets. Hollister's expression hardened. Are you certain of that, Miss Whitman? Do you know everything about the man you're planning to marry tomorrow? Deanna appeared at Dahlia's side, her stance protective. Say what you came to say, Hollister, and then leave. Dawson will be back from town any minute, and I don't think you want to be here when he arrives. Hollister smiled thinly. On the contrary, I'd welcome the opportunity to confront him directly. But I thought Miss Whitman deserved to hear this first without his influence. He turned back to Dahlia. Did you know that your fiancé was responsible for the death of a man in Missouri after the war? That he fled west to escape the consequences? Dahlia felt as if she'd been struck. That's not true, she said automatically, though a small voice in her mind whispered doubts. Dawson had never spoken in detail about his reasons for coming west, beyond vague references to seeking a fresh start after the war. Isn't it? Hollister reached into his coat and withdrew a folded newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. This says otherwise. With trembling fingers, Dahlia took the paper. It was a brief article from a Missouri newspaper dated 1866, describing an altercation between a former Union soldier, Dawson Everett, and a local man named James Harlow. According to the account, Everett had killed Harlow in a fight and fled before authorities could apprehend him. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have business interests in Missouri. When I heard of your engagement, I thought it prudent to inquire about your intended's background." Hollister's tone was smooth, almost sympathetic. "I believe in knowing who one is dealing with, Miss Whitman. Everett has refused my very generous offers for his land for years. Now I understand why he can't risk the scrutiny that might come with such a transaction." Deanna snatched the clipping from Dahlia's hand, scanning it quickly. "This is a lie," she said flatly, "or at the very least, a gross misrepresentation of what happened." "Is it?" Hollister raised an eyebrow. "Then let Everett explain it himself. Let him tell his bride-to-be why he's been hiding from his past all these years." The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted the confrontation. Dawson rode into the yard, his expression darkening as he recognized Hollister's horse tied to the hitching post. "What's going on here?" he demanded as he dismounted and strode toward the porch. Hollister turned to face him, a look of satisfaction on his face. "Just having a little chat with your fiancé about your colorful past, Everett. Specifically about James Harlow and why you left Missouri in such a hurry." Dawson went still, his face draining of color. His eyes met Dahlia's, and in them she saw not guilt but deep, painful regret. "Get off my property," he said to Hollister, his voice dangerously quiet. "Gladly." Hollister retrieved his hat, placing it on his head with deliberate care. "I've said what I came to say. Miss Whitman deserves to know the truth about the man she's marrying." He descended the steps, pausing beside Dawson. "My offer for your land still stands. When your bride decides she doesn't want to be married to a fugitive, you might find yourself in need of a fresh start elsewhere." Dawson's hands clenched into fists, but he made no move as Hollister mounted his horse and rode away. Only when the man was out of sight did he turn to face Dahlia and Deanna, his expression guarded. "Come inside," Deanna said firmly, breaking the tense silence. "This isn't a conversation for the porch." In the kitchen, Dawson sank heavily into a chair, looking older than Dahlia had ever seen him. Deanna placed the newspaper clipping on the table in front of him. "Is it true?" Dahlia asked quietly, taking the seat across from him. "Did you kill this man?" Dawson nodded slowly, his eyes on the yellowed paper. "Yes, but not the way that article makes it sound." He took a deep breath. "After the war, I went back to our hometown in Missouri. Our parents had died while I was fighting, and I wanted to settle their affairs, sell the farm. James Harlow had been a Confederate sympathizer. He'd made life difficult for Union families during the war, including ours." Deanna's expression hardened at the mention of Harlow's name. "He was a bully and a coward. He threatened Ma when Pa was ill, said he'd burn the farm if she didn't pay him protection money." Dawson continued, his voice steady but heavy with old pain. "One night, I was at the local saloon. Harlow came in with some friends, already drunk. He recognized me, started making comments about Union soldiers, about our family. I ignored him as best I could, but then he said something about Deanna. He glanced at his sister, something I couldn't let pass." "What did he say?" Dahlia asked. Deanna answered before Dawson could. "He'd been spreading rumors that I'd been entertaining Confederate soldiers for favors during the war. It was a vicious lie. I was caring for our dying parents while Dawson was fighting." Dawson's jaw tightened at the memory. "I told him to take it back. He threw a punch instead. We fought. He pulled a knife." His hand went unconsciously to his side where Dahlia knew a long scar marked his ribs. "I managed to turn it against him. It wasn't intentional, but he died." Self-defense, Dahlia said, relief washing through her. That's how I saw it, Dawson agreed. But Harlow had friends in the sheriff's office. They weren't interested in my side of the story. I was a Union soldier in a town that had favored the Confederacy. The newspaper was owned by Harlow's cousin. He gestured to the clipping. They printed their version before I even had a chance to speak to the authorities. So you ran, Dahlia concluded. I left, he corrected gently. There's a difference. I wasn't running from justice, I was seeking it elsewhere. I knew I wouldn't get a fair hearing in that town. He looked at Deanna. I wrote to Deanna when I found this place, told her what happened. She sold the farm and joined me a year later. Deanna nodded confirmation. Everything he's told you is the truth, Dahlia. Dawson's no murderer. He defended himself and his family's honor against a man who deserved what he got. Dahlia considered this, looking at the man she had agreed to marry. His expression was open now, vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. He was waiting for her judgment, she realized, prepared to accept whatever decision she made. Why didn't you tell me this before? She asked, her voice soft but steady. I should have, he admitted. At first, it seemed too heavy a burden to place on a new relationship. Then, as we grew closer, I was afraid. The admission clearly cost him. Afraid you might see me differently, that you might not understand. You feared I would think less of you for defending yourself and your sister's reputation. He met her gaze directly. I feared you would think less of me for taking a man's life, regardless of the circumstances. It's not something I'm proud of, Dahlia, even if it was justified. The honesty of his response touched her deeply. This was the man she loved, honorable, thoughtful, willing to bear the weight of his actions even when those actions were forced upon him. She reached across the table and took his hand. I wish you had trusted me with this sooner, but I understand why you hesitated. Nothing in what you've told me changes how I feel about you, Dawson. Nothing. The relief in his eyes was profound. You still want to marry me tomorrow, more than ever, she assured him, squeezing his hand. Though I think we should discuss what to do about Hollister. He clearly means to cause trouble, Deanna snorted. Hollister's been trying to get his hands on our land for years. The spring on our property feeds the creek that runs through the valley. If he controlled the water source, he could control the whole area. But why bring this up now? Dahlia wondered. Why wait until the day before our wedding? Because he's running out of options, Dawson said grimly. The territorial governor just signed a new water rights law that will make it harder for anyone to monopolize water sources. Hollister's been buying up land all along the creek, but without our property, his plans are worthless. So he hoped to drive a wedge between us, Dahlia concluded, to ruin our wedding and perhaps force you to sell the ranch and leave. That would be my guess. Dawson's expression hardened. He underestimated both of us. Deanna rose from the table, a determined look on her face. I think we should proceed with the wedding as planned, show Hollister and anyone else who might be interested that we're not intimidated by old ghosts. I agree, Dahlia said firmly. Our future together is what matters, not the past. Dawson looked at her with such love and gratitude that it made her heart ache. I don't deserve you, he said softly. Yes, you do, she replied. We deserve each other and the happiness we've found together. No one, especially not Edward Hollister, is going to take that away from us. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the October sky a perfect blue above Redemption Creek. The church was filled to capacity, with every resident of the town and surrounding ranches in attendance. Flowers gathered from the desert blooms decorated the simple wooden pews, and sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the proceedings. Dahlia stood at the back of the church, her arm linked with Judge Parker's. With no family of her own present, she had asked the respected jurist to give her away, a request he had accepted with dignified pleasure. Her dress, a creation of ivory satin with delicate lace trim, had been made by the town's dressmaker with contributions of fabric and notions from the Ladies' Aid Society. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning by Deanna, who stood at the altar as her bridesmaid, resplendent in a deep blue dress. But it was Dawson who captured Dahlia's attention as she began her walk down the aisle. He stood tall and proud at the altar, his expression transforming from solemn to wonder as he caught sight of her. In that moment, all doubts, all shadows of the past, all concerns about Hollister's machinations faded away. There was only this man, this love, this promise they were about to make to each other. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, with Reverend Thompson speaking eloquently about the nature of love and commitment. When it came time for their vows, Dawson surprised Dahlia by speaking from the heart rather than repeating the traditional words. "Dahlia Whitman, when I found you crying in the street that day, I had no idea I was meeting the woman who would change my life. You came to Redemption Creek seeking a new beginning, and in helping you find yours, I discovered my own. I promised to love you, to protect you, to be honest with you in all things for all the days of my life." Tears welled in Dahlia's eyes as she responded with her own heartfelt words. "Dawson Everett, you offered your hand when I was alone and afraid, saying you're not alone. Those words changed everything for me. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and valued for who I am. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to love you completely and faithfully, to build our future together day by day, for as long as we both shall live." The exchange of rings his mother's banned for her, a simple gold ring for him, sealed their vows. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause as Dawson drew Dahlia into a tender kiss. The celebration that followed at Whispering Pine Ranch was everything a frontier wedding should be: abundant food, lively music, dancing that continued well into the night. Dahlia moved through the festivities in a state of joyful disbelief, accepting congratulations and well wishes from the community that had become her own. Edward Hollister did not attend, a fact noted with relief by both Dahlia and Dawson. Whatever schemes he might be planning, they would face them together when the time came. As the evening drew to a close, the guests departed with final good wishes, leaving the newlyweds alone at last. Deanna had arranged to stay in town with friends, giving them privacy for their first night as husband and wife. Standing on the porch of what was now truly their home, Dawson drew Dahlia into his arms. "Mrs. Everett," he murmured against her hair, "I like the sound of that." "So do I," she replied, leaning into his embrace, "very much." He tilted her face up to his expression serious. "I want you to know that I meant every word of my vows today. No more secrets between us, no more shadows." "No more shadows," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Only the future we build together." With a gentle sweep, he lifted her into his arms and carried her across the threshold of their home into the beginning of their life together. In the years that followed, Dahlia and Dawson Everett built that life with the same care and dedication they had shown in their courtship. Whispering Pine Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship, with Dahlia applying her organizational skills and business acumen to expand their operations. Edward Hollister's attempts to acquire their land eventually ceased when the territorial legislature passed comprehensive water rights laws that protected established ranchers. He sold his holdings in Redemption Creek and moved to California, reportedly to try his luck in the booming city of San Francisco. Dahlia never did become a schoolteacher in Redemption Creek, but she found other ways to contribute to education in the community. She established a lending library that operated out of the mercantile, and later, when Wilson retired and sold them the business, she converted the storeroom into a small classroom where she offered evening lessons to adults who wished to improve their reading and arithmetic skills. Their family grew with the birth of a son, James Thomas Everett, named for both their fathers, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth Deanna. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, developing the same love for the land that their parents shared. Deanna remained at Whispering Pine, building her own cabin on the property and continuing to partner in the ranch operations. She never married, claiming that one Everett wedding per generation was quite enough, but she was a beloved aunt to James and Elizabeth and an indispensable part of their family circle. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dawson surprised Dahlia with a special gift, the deed to a plot of land in town where, he announced, they would build a proper schoolhouse for Redemption Creek's growing population of children. You might not have become the town's schoolteacher as planned, he told her as they stood on the empty lot, envisioning the building that would rise there. But you've been teaching all of us since the day you arrived. It seems fitting to make it official. Dahlia, deeply moved by the gesture, wrapped her arms around her husband. 10 years ago, I thought my dreams had been shattered when I learned the teaching position was filled. I had no idea that losing that opportunity would lead me to everything I truly wanted. Everything. He asked with a smile, holding her close. She looked up at him, this man who had stepped forward when she was alone and afraid, who had offered not just help but a lifetime of love and partnership. Everything, she confirmed, and so much more than I ever dared to dream. As they walked back to their waiting children, hand in hand under the vast Arizona sky, Dahlia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From tears in the dusty street of a frontier town to profound happiness as the wife of a man whose quiet strength had become the foundation of her world, it was a path she could never have planned, but would never regret taking. In the end, it wasn't the life she had expected when she boarded that stagecoach in Philadelphia all those years ago. It was immeasurably better.